Trump's Cadillac Motorcade slowed to a stop amidst the bustling city streets, the afternoon heat shimmering in waves across the asphalt. The relentless sun bore down on the scene, illuminating a metropolis alive with movement and sound. Car horns blaring, pedestrians rushing, and the rhythm of urban life surging forward. Inside the vehicle, Trump listened to one of his advisors reading a report, his focus sharp until something outside the tinted window caught his eye. Amid the chaotic sidewalk, a frail elderly woman stood alone, clutching a worn piece of cardboard. Her slight frame seemed swallowed by the crowd, her stark white hair almost glowing in the sun. Deep wrinkles etched her face, and her hands trembled as she held up the sign, its faded letters pleading, "Please help me. My granddaughter needs a miracle." Her eyes, though tired, held a silent, desperate plea. Trump's attention lingered. The words on the cardboard seemed to echo in his mind, and he couldn't look away. "Stop the car," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. The motorcade came to a sudden halt, tires screeching and traffic grinding to a confused stop behind them. Inside the vehicle, his advisors and security team exchanged uncertain glances. "Sir, this isn't a safe place to stop," one of the agents cautioned. Trump didn't waver. His gaze stayed fixed on the woman. "I need to know her story," he replied firmly. With that, he opened the car door, stepping out into the street. The city seemed to hold its breath as passers-by turned their heads, some recognizing him instantly and pulling out their phones. Trump walked toward the woman, his stride steady, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. As he approached, he crouched slightly to meet her eye level. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer but carrying the weight of his presence. The woman hesitated, her lips trembling before she answered. "Martha Ellman." "And why are you here?" Trump asked gently, his tone coaxing yet firm. Martha's hands gripped the sign tightly, as though it were her last lifeline. "My granddaughter," she began, her voice cracking. "Her parents, they died in the flood. It's just me now. We've lost our home, everything. I don't know what to do. She's sick, and I can't lose her." Her words hung heavy in the air, cutting through the noise of the city. Trump straightened, exhaling deeply. He turned to his security detail, his voice steady but resolute. "Prepare the car. We're going to see where she's staying." "Sir," one of the agents interjected, his concern evident. "This area isn't secure. We shouldn't linger." Trump's gaze didn't falter. "If she can live there, I can visit. If you're afraid, you're welcome to stay behind." The air grew tense, but no one objected further. Trump placed a reassuring hand on Martha's shoulder. "Lead the way. I want to meet your granddaughter." Martha's eyes shimmered, the faintest glimmer of hope returning. She nodded, her steps slow but purposeful as she guided him down the crowded street. Behind them, the motorcade followed, an extraordinary sight weaving its way through the ordinary chaos of the city. Each step revealed the weight of Martha's struggles. Her shoulders sagged under years of hardship, yet her determination pushed her forward. As they walked, Trump broke the silence, his voice kind but direct. "What happened to your family?" Martha paused briefly, her grip on the sign tightening, before turning to look at him. Her cloudy eyes reflected a deep sorrow, but also a glimmer of resilience. "It was the biggest flood I've ever seen," she said, her voice trembling. "The water rose so fast, faster than we could do anything. My son Jack and my daughter-in-law Laura tried to get Emma to safety, but they didn't make it." Her voice quivered, and her hands gripped the sign tighter, as though trying to suppress the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Jack yelled at me to take Emma and run. He and Laura said they'd figure out a way to escape later. But the current, it was too strong. It swept them away. I couldn't do anything except hold Emma tight and pray. When I found my son, it was too late. Tears rolled down her wrinkled face, but her voice remained steady, filled with pain. We lost everything, our home, our belongings, our memories. Now it's just Emma and me, trying to survive each day. But I'm old, and I can't give her the life she deserves. Trump stood silent for a moment. Her story wasn't just about personal tragedy. It painted a broader picture of countless families enduring loss and despair. "What have you been doing since then?" he asked, his voice low. Mrs. Martha lowered her head, her shoulders sagging even more. "I've done whatever I could, from cleaning houses to collecting recyclables, but I'm not as strong as I used to be. No one wants to hire me anymore." In the end, I took to the streets with this sign, hoping someone would stop to help. But they just pass by, as if I don't exist. Trump said nothing, but his gaze grew heavier. He watched her walk, her steps slower now, weighed down by her story. They turned into a narrow alley. On either side, the walls were worn and cracked, with broken bricks scattered along the ground. The motorcade behind them seemed almost swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere and the stench of garbage strewn about. "We're here," Mrs. Martha said softly, pointing to the end of the alley. Before them stood a makeshift shelter, cobbled together from plastic sheets and scraps of wood. Torn tarps revealed a cramped space inside, barely big enough for 2 people to lie down. An old wooden bed, a few broken plastic chairs, and a table fashioned from stacked cardboard boxes made up the entirety of their possessions. Trump stopped in front of the shelter, his eyes scanning the surroundings. A few children, their faces streaked with dirt, played with empty tin cans, stealing curious glances at him and the motorcade. Adults stood at a distance, their eyes a mix of suspicion and unease. From inside the shelter, a small voice called out, "Grandma?" A frail little girl about 10 years old stepped out. Her tangled hair nearly obscured her face, and her tiny hands clutched a makeshift doll crafted from a plastic bottle and scraps of fabric. "Emma, come here," Mrs. Martha called. The girl ran to her, wrapping her arms around her grandmother. Her curious gaze shifted to Trent. "You don't have to be afraid, Emma," Trump said gently, lowering himself to her eye level. "Your name is Emma, right?" The girl nodded, her eyes still cautious. "Can you tell me about yourself?" Trump asked, his warm smile softening her apprehension. Emma glanced at Mrs. Martha, seeking approval. When her grandmother nodded, she began to speak, her voice shaky. "I don't remember much about that night, just that the water came so fast. My mom and dad told me to run to the neighbors, but they didn't make it. After that, I stayed with Grandma. But she's worked so hard, I don't want her to suffer anymore. I just want her to rest." Her voice cracked, and tears began to stream down her thin cheeks. Trump placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice firm yet gentle, comforting. "You've been very brave, Emma, and so has your grandmother. But from now on, you won't have to fight this alone. I'm here to help." Emma looked up at him, her large eyes shimmering with a spark of hope. She nodded but still clung tightly to Mrs. Martha, as if afraid all of this might just be a fleeting dream. Trump turned to his motorcade, his expression resolute. "I want a full report on Mrs. Martha's health and the living conditions here immediately," he commanded. "Starting tonight, I want a medical team assessing both her and Emma. And not just them. I want to know about every family in this area." One of his advisors hesitated. "Sir, Perhaps we should leave this to charitable organizations for long-term management, said the Trump interrupted, his voice ringing with conviction. No, they've waited long enough. If a little girl like Emma can stand here and fight for her grandmother, we have no excuse to delay. Action starts now. Emma looked up at him, her tear-filled eyes wide with gratitude. She whispered, her voice small but filled with emotion. "Thank you, Mr. Trump. I just want Gran to stop worrying." Emma's hands relaxed a little, dropping to her side. Trump bent down, meeting her gaze directly. "I promise you, Emma, this is just the beginning. You've done enough. Now it's my turn to help." Emma and Mrs. Martha led Trump deeper into the slums, where sunlight was obscured by patchwork roofs made of old tin sheets and plastic tarps. The narrow pathway grew tighter, flanked by piles of trash and stagnant puddles emanating a damp, moldy odor. Each step Trump took was a vivid reminder of the hardships many people faced daily. Residents began to emerge from their homes, their gazes a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. To them, the sight of someone like Trump, dressed impeccably in a suit and walking amidst the crumbling homes, was beyond imagination. At first they kept their distance, observing from afar. Mrs. Martha glanced back at him, her voice soft but firm. "Sir, I'm not the only one living like this. Many people here lost everything after the flood. We're not just poor, we're forgotten." Her words opened a floodgate for countless untold stories. A middle-aged man, thin and clad in a worn-out t-shirt, hesitated for a moment before stepping forward and speaking. "Mr. Trump, I can't believe you're really here." Trump nodded, his voice warm. "Can you share your story with me?" The man took a deep breath, as if summoning all his courage. "My name is Sam. I used to work at a mechanic's shop. After the flood, the shop was completely destroyed. I lost my job, my home. Now it's just me and my 2 kids. I've been trying to find work, but no one wants to hire someone like me. No qualifications, nothing left. We survive on meager charity meals and days spent scavenging recyclables. But the most painful thing is watching my kids grow up without an education." Following Sam's gaze, Trump saw 2 children sitting by a pile of trash, picking through scraps to amuse themselves. Their small hands were dirty, but their eyes shone with innocence and yearning. "We don't need much," Sam continued, his voice breaking. "I just want a chance to work, to give my kids the life they deserve." Like an unstoppable wave, more residents of the slum began to approach, bringing their stories with them. A woman cradling a small child, her face streaked with tears, spoke. "My husband died in the flood. I'm raising 2 kids on my own, working at a garment factory. But the wages aren't enough for food, let alone sending them to school. I just want—" Her voice cracked. "I just want my children to have a better future than I did." A war veteran, leaning on a cane, stepped forward, his voice heavy. "I fought for this country, but when I came back, I had nothing left, no home, no job. I survive on food donations, but it's not enough." Their homes, drawn by the commotion and the sight of help that had long seemed unimaginable. Medical workers moved swiftly, setting up stations and attending to the elderly and children first. A doctor approached Mrs. Martha, gently guiding her to sit on a makeshift stool for an examination. "Let's check on you, ma'am," he said kindly. Emma stood close by, her small hand clutching her grandmother's, as though afraid to let go. Volunteers distributed food and water, their voices calm and reassuring as they called out for families to come forward. A social worker knelt beside Sam and his children, handing them blankets and asking about their needs. The children, usually so wary of strangers, smiled shyly as they clutched the clean, warm blankets. Trump's team worked tirelessly, gathering information and coordinating efforts. A young advisor, clipboard in hand, approached him. "Sir, we're making progress. The medical team is addressing immediate health concerns, and the residents are beginning to trust us. The data on their living conditions should be ready by the evening." Trump nodded, his gaze fixed on the scene unfolding before him. "Good. But this is just the first step. Make sure we have plans in place for long-term housing, education, and employment. These people don't need just relief. They need a chance to rebuild." Nearby, Emma spotted Trump and ran over, her eyes alight with gratitude. "Uncle Trump, you did it!" she exclaimed, her voice ringing with joy. Trump knelt to meet her gaze. "I told you, Emma, this is just the beginning. We're going to make sure you, your grandmother, and everyone here have what they need to live with dignity." Emma threw her arms around him, her small frame trembling with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. As the sun began to set, the slum looked different. The oppressive air of despair had lifted, replaced by a palpable sense of hope. Children played with newfound energy, their laughter echoing through the narrow pathways. Adults gathered in small groups, sharing stories and tentative smiles, their burdens lightened, if only for a moment. From her tent, Mrs. Martha watched it all, her heart swelling with a gratitude she hadn't felt in years. She turned to Emma and pulled her close. "Maybe," she said softly, "this time, things will really change." Trump stood on the edge of the makeshift camp, watching the activity with a quiet resolve. The cries for help that had once gone unheard were now being answered. As his motorcade prepared to leave, he took one last look at the slum, his expression firm. "We're not stopping here," he said to his advisor, his voice steady. "This is only the beginning of what we're going to do." Said, her voice soft and filled with pride. "Look at what you've done, Emma. You gave us all something to believe in." Emma, her eyes wide with wonder, gazed at the monument. "I didn't do it alone, Grandma. Everyone came together. You always said we're stronger when we help each other." Around them, the once desolate slum had transformed. Children played in the park, their laughter filling the air. Parents watched from benches, many of them newly employed through the initiatives that had begun that day. New homes stood where makeshift shelters once leaned, their bright walls a testament to the resilience of the community. Volunteers and workers still moved through the area, though their tasks were no longer about survival, but about sustaining the progress they had made. A small school now stood at the edge of the park, its walls decorated with colorful drawings created by the children who had once scavenged for scraps. From the edge of the park, a familiar figure watched quietly. Trump, dressed more casually than usual, stood with his arms crossed, his expression thoughtful. As if sensing his presence, Emma turned and ran to him. "Uncle Trump!" she called, her voice ringing with joy. Trump knelt as Emma reached him, and she threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you for keeping your promise," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. He pulled back to look at her, a rare softness in his eyes. "Thank you, Emma, for reminding all of us what hope and determination can do." Grandma Martha approached slowly, her steps steadier than before. She extended a hand which Trump took firmly. "I never thought I'd see this day," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've done more than just help us. You've given us a future." Trump smiled and looked at the thriving community around them. "It wasn't just me, it was all of you. Your courage, your strength, and your unwillingness to give up. This is your victory." As the sun set, casting a warm golden glow over the park, the community gathered around the monument for an impromptu celebration. Voices rose in song, laughter echoed, and for the first time in years, the air was filled with hope instead of despair. Emma stood at the center of it all, holding her grandmother's hand, a symbol of how even the smallest spark could light the way for an entire community. Trump watched, a satisfied smile on his face, knowing this was just the beginning of a movement that would inspire change far beyond the bounds of that small slum. People chose to stop and listen. Everything changed. Not just for me and my grandma, but for so many others. It's not about the sign. It's about the kindness and courage of people who believe in helping each other. The audience erupted into applause, and Martha, her voice trembling with emotion, added, "We were forgotten, but now we feel seen, heard, and loved. That means more than I can ever put into words." Trump placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, his voice steady as he said, "Emma reminds us that even the smallest voice can spark a movement. This isn't just their story, it's our story as a nation. Together, we're proving that hope can begin anywhere." The event concluded with a standing ovation as the crowd, moved to tears, acknowledged the transformative power of empathy and collective action. Back in the slum-turned communes, the changes continued to grow. Permanent schools replaced the temporary classrooms, offering a robust education to children who once had none. Job training programs allowed parents to find sustainable work, lifting families out of poverty. Emma's Little Teaching Group became a formal youth leadership program, mentoring children across similar communities. She was often seen leading small workshops or helping younger children learn to read, her determination contagious. Martha, with her newfound health and energy, joined a community council formed to oversee the progress and ensure that no one fell through the cracks again. The community became a model for what could be achieved when compassion and action came together. Visitors from across the country came to see the transformation for themselves, taking inspiration back to their own neighborhoods. In a quiet moment, Emma stood before the monument that now graced the center of the park. She ran her fingers over the inscription, "Hope begins in the smallest places," and whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." "Madame Citeza," her husband said. Then he pointed at the monument. "Can you remember the last time we talked?" Martha joined her, placing an arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. "You've given so many people hope, Emma. And it all started because you believed things could change." Wearing patent leather pants over her jacket made a boy feel safe regardless of his skin. Emma looked up at her grandmother and smiled, her voice soft but firm. "And now, Grandma, we'll make sure it never stops." Vocational training programs were established in underprivileged areas nationwide. Temporary schools evolved into permanent institutions with trained teachers, modern facilities, and accessible resources. Children like Emma now had a chance to dream beyond their circumstances, while adults received vocational training to secure stable jobs and support their families. Free healthcare initiatives brought mobile medical units to remote and underserved areas, providing regular checkups, vaccinations, and treatments for chronic illnesses. Health camps were set up to educate communities about preventive care, reducing the burden of untreated conditions. The movement inspired a wave of community-driven actions. Students across the country organized donation drives, collecting books, clothes, and school supplies for struggling families. Retired professionals volunteered their time and expertise to train and mentor youth. Celebrities and influencers used their platforms to raise funds and awareness, amplifying the message of hope and resilience. At a national summit to review the progress of the initiative, Trump addressed the audience with a tone both humble and resolute. This is not the work of one person or one administration. This is the power of collective humanity. When we see our neighbors in need and act, we rebuild not just communities, but the soul of our nation. And we are far from finished. Back in the transformed community, Emma, now a symbol of hope for millions, continued to lead by example. She gathered her peers in the park each afternoon, teaching them lessons she had learned in school and encouraging them to dream big. Her small but impactful efforts inspired other children to become leaders in their own communities. One evening, as Emma and Martha stood before the monument, a group of reporters approached them. One asked Emma, "What do you want to say to the world now?" Emma thought for a moment, then smiled, her voice steady and full of conviction. "I want to tell everyone that no matter how small you feel, your voice matters. Change starts when we refuse to give up, on ourselves and on each other." Martha watched her granddaughter with pride, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You're right, Emma," she said softly. "Hope begins in the smallest places and grows when we dare to believe in it." As the sun set over the community, the sound of children's laughter echoed through the air, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and unity. Of struggle and resilience were not confined to the United States. The Hope for the Forgotten movement began expanding internationally, focusing on regions where communities faced similar hardships. Vocational training programs were introduced in impoverished villages across developing nations, teaching skills in agriculture, craftsmanship, and technology. Mobile education units equipped with digital learning tools brought schooling to remote areas, empowering children who had never seen a classroom. Mobile health clinics travel to regions devastated by natural disasters and conflict, providing critical care to those without access to medical facilities. Partnerships with global charities ensured funding and logistics for these operations, enabling life-saving treatments and vaccinations. Emma's story, now a global symbol of courage and hope, continued to inspire. Invited to speak at international summits and conferences, she shared her journey, reminding the world of the power of listening and acting. At a global education conference, Emma addressed leaders and activists. "I thought I was too small to make a difference, but I've learned that no act of kindness is ever too small. If we believe in each other, if we stand together, we can change not just one life, but millions." The audience, moved to tears, gave Emma a standing ovation. Her words became a rallying cry for communities and leaders worldwide. The Global Monument of Hope was unveiled 2 years after the movement began, located at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. The statue depicted a young girl handing a book to a soldier kneeling beside her, representing the unity of knowledge, compassion, and protection. The inscription at its base read, "Hope begins with one voice, one act, one dream." The dedication ceremony brought together world leaders, activists, and individuals whose lives had been transformed by the movement. Emma and Martha were invited as guests of honor. As the crowd watched, Emma placed a small replica of her original cardboard sign at the monument's base. When asked what she hoped people would take from the monument, Emma smiled and said, "I hope it reminds everyone that change starts with the courage to act and the kindness to listen." As the ceremony ended, Martha held Emma's hand tightly, whispering, "You've given the world something it desperately needed, a reason to believe in a better tomorrow." Trump, standing in the crowd, reflected silently on how far the journey had come. Turning to his team, he said, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning of something much greater. Hope doesn't stop at borders. It's our responsibility to keep it alive wherever it's needed." And so, The Hope for the Forgotten movement continued to grow, crossing oceans and breaking barriers, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can ignite the flames of transformation and unity worldwide. A standing ovation from the crowd. Emma stood tall, her voice steady and filled with emotion. I started with nothing but a cardboard sign and a little bit of courage. I thought I was too small to make a difference, but I've learned that hope isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. The kindness of strangers didn't just change my life, it showed me the power of believing in each other. Martha, standing beside her, held Emma's hand tightly, her eyes glistening with pride. The audience listened intently as Emma continued. This movement isn't about one person or one place. It's about all of us, working together to make sure no one feels forgotten. The festival showcased performances, speeches, and exhibits from communities around the world that had been transformed by the initiative. Videos of restored villages, thriving schools, and smiling children played on large screens, drawing tears and applause from the attendees. During the event, a new global slogan was unveiled, "Hope Unites Us." The message resonated deeply with everyone present, encapsulating the spirit of a movement that had transcended borders and cultural differences. As the festival came to a close, Trump took the stage to deliver the final address. His voice was firm but emotional as he said, "What began as a simple act of kindness in one community has grown into a global movement. This is proof that change is possible when we refuse to turn away from those in need. The challenges are great, but our determination is greater. Together, we will keep building a world where hope is not a privilege but a right." The crowd erupted in applause, united in their commitment to continue the mission. In the months that followed, the Global Hope Initiative expanded even further. Renewable energy projects brought electricity to remote villages, empowering communities to build local businesses and access digital education. Health centers became permanent fixtures in underserved regions, providing consistent care to millions. Amara, the girl from the African village who had been inspired by Emma's story, became a local leader in her community. Under her guidance, a small cooperative was formed, teaching women sustainable farming techniques and enabling them to sell their crops at fair prices. Her determination sparked a wave of similar initiatives in neighboring villages, proving that one voice truly could inspire many. Emma's cardboard sign was eventually placed in a museum exhibit dedicated to the movement, alongside artifacts from other communities that had joined the cause. It stood as a reminder of how small beginnings could lead to monumental change. Years later, as Emma reflected on everything that had been achieved, she spoke at another global summit, her words carrying the weight of her journey. "The world listened when I asked for help, and it answered with action. Now it's our turn to make sure no voice goes unheard, no child is left behind, and no dream is considered too small." The applause that followed was a testament to a movement that had reshaped not only lives, but the very meaning of hope itself. The journey, though far from over, had proven that with courage and kindness, the world could come together to create a brighter future for all. Them to pursue higher education at renowned universities around the world. One recipient, a boy from India, shared, "This scholarship is not just an opportunity, it is my future. I will return to my village as an engineer to help others like me." 3 healthcare initiatives have transformed lives in underserved regions. Mobile health clinics now reach remote villages, offering free medical care, vaccinations, and health education. A nurse in a rural community in Southeast Asia said, "For the first time, we don't have to travel days for basic checkups. Health is finally accessible." The Maternal and Child Wellness Program provides critical care to pregnant women and newborns in high-risk areas, drastically reducing infant mortality rates. A mother in Uganda expressed gratitude, saying, "My baby and I are alive today because of this program." Global partnerships have strengthened these efforts, with international organizations and private companies contributing resources and expertise. The movement's success has ignited a wave of volunteerism, inspiring people from all walks of life to take part in rebuilding and empowering communities. In Hope Village, Emma has become a symbol of resilience and determination. She continues to teach and mentor children, reminding them daily that their dreams are valid and achievable. The cardboard sign in her classroom serves as a powerful testament to the idea that even the smallest actions can lead to monumental change. On the 5th anniversary of the Global Hope Initiative, a celebration was held at the United Nations, bringing together leaders, volunteers, and beneficiaries from across the globe. Emma, now a confident young woman, addressed the assembly. Hope doesn't have borders. It doesn't belong to one country, one community, or one person. It belongs to all of us. And when we share it, we change the world. Her words were met with a standing ovation, echoing the impact of a movement that started with a simple act of kindness. Trump, attending the event, reflected on the journey. In a private moment, he remarked to an aide, "This is what true leadership is about. Not power, but purpose. And this purpose will outlive us all." As the event concluded, the initiative's next phase was unveiled, a commitment to renewable energy projects to bring electricity to rural areas, ensuring sustainable development for generations to come. The journey was far from over, but the legacy of hope, courage, and collective action continued to grow, proving that change is possible when people unite for a common cause. The Hope for the Forgotten movement reached a new milestone, bringing significant change to impoverished communities. With the launch of mobile health clinics, millions in remote areas gained access to medical care. An 80-year-old woman in Indonesia expressed, "I never thought I'd see a doctor in my life. They saved me and the children in our village." The movement also improved maternal and child health care, drastically reducing mortality rates in underserved regions. 5 years into the movement, a monument was unveiled at the United Nations headquarters in New York to honor those who contributed to the cause. The statue depicted a young girl holding up a cardboard sign with the words, "Hope never fades." At its base was a message, "Plant seeds of kindness so no one is left behind." As the movement continued to grow, Emma and Martha remained in Hope Village. Martha, now frail, often sat on her porch, watching Emma teach the children. One evening, Martha took Emma's hand and softly said, "Emma, you've changed the world. Are you proud of yourself?" Emma smiled, her eyes shining. "I am, but I know there's still so much to do. I want every child to have the same opportunities I had. I won't stop." Martha squeezed her hand, whispering, "Keep going, Emma. You're the hope of a generation." Despite its many successes, the movement faced ongoing challenges. Climate change, floods, and droughts destroyed newly built infrastructure, while conflicts in regions like the Middle East and Africa delayed or halted several projects. At the movement's headquarters, Trump declared, "We can't solve every problem in a day, but if we give up, those who need us will never have a chance. As long as one person is left behind, we must keep going." A decade after the movement began, its impact was clear. Over 20 million people gained access to clean water, millions of children attended school for the first time, and more than 1,000 impoverished communities were completely rebuilt. At the 10-year anniversary celebration in Washington, Trump addressed the crowd, saying, "What we do is not for fame or glory, but for responsibility." This movement isn't about me or any one person. It's about all of us. We won't stop until no one is left forgotten. Turning to Emma, now a renowned social activist, he placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Your journey is just beginning. Keep spreading hope, Emma. You've changed the world, and you'll achieve even more." Emma, her eyes filled with determination, promised, "I won't stop." The story of Martha, Emma, and the Hope for the Forgotten movement may have concluded, but its message continues to resonate. It is not just a tale of courage, it is a call to action for all of us to help those in need. This story is fictional, but its message is real. Millions like Emma and Martha are waiting for help worldwide. They may not hold up a cardboard sign on the streets, but their pain, loss, and desire for a better life are real. Start small. Donate to bring change to those in need. Volunteer to directly impact lives. Share this story and awaken kindness in others. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel to stay inspired. Every subscription and share adds a spark of hope for those in need. Let's spread the light of compassion together.